Caitlin Clark hasn't slammed a podium. She hasn't demanded trades or unleashed angry tweets, but if you've been paying attention, you already know she's planning something. Every stare, every subtle move, every quiet refusal to conform is a message. She's not here to fit in, she's here to take over. From the moment she entered the WNBA, Clark was hailed as a generational talent, a once-in-a-lifetime scorer, a walking headline. But instead of being unleashed, she's been boxed in, not by defenders, not by pressure, but by the very people who were supposed to guide her, the Indiana Fever. They wanted the spotlight she brings, the crowds she draws, and the millions of eyes glued to every one of her plays. But what they didn't want was to build around her, to trust her, to let her lead. And now, she's done waiting. Because Caitlin Clark isn't asking for permission anymore. She's taking notes, choosing allies, recreating the world that made her unstoppable. Quietly, sharply, and with one clear goal: build the system they refuse to give her. Whether the Fever gets on board or gets left behind is up to them. But make no mistake, the takeover has already begun. You don't take the NCAA all-time leading scorer, someone who can change a game in seconds, and tell her not to shoot. But that's exactly what's been happening in Indiana. Game after game, a clear pattern has emerged. Caitlin Clark catches fire, hitting back-to-back threes, shifting momentum, igniting the crowd, and then she vanishes. Not because she cooled off, not because defenders shut her down, but because her coach did. In the Liberty game, Clark lit up the first half with 5 threes. She was in a rhythm, the kind that makes defenders panic and fans leap out of their seats. Then suddenly the ball stopped coming her way. She barely touched it. She barely shot, and the game slipped away. Why? Because Stephanie White wanted her to run the system. Play it safe, defer, pass. In other words, don't be Caitlin Clark. And this isn't just fan speculation. Clark herself dropped the truth on a podcast. Subtle, but unmistakable. She explained how, as a shooter, once you hit 2 or 3 in a row, you have to keep firing. That's basketball instinct. That's confidence. That's how stars take over games. But in Indiana, that instinct is being shut down. If I have 2 back-to-back, she said, I'm probably going to launch a third, even if it's not advised. Read between the lines. Not advised by who? The answer's obvious, and it's not coming from defenders on the floor. It's coming from the sidelines, from a coach who seems determined to mold her into something she's not. And that's not development, that's sabotage. Caitlin Clark isn't just a shooter. She's a conductor, a creator, a player who reads the floor like it's unfolding in slow motion while everyone else is still catching up. That's what made her unstoppable at Iowa. That's what turned her into a national phenomenon. But in Indiana, that version of Caitlin doesn't exist, not because she can't, but because she's not allowed to. The system Stephanie White has built is slow, rigid, and outdated. A motion offense where the ball rarely finds its way back around, where instinct is replaced with structure, where creativity is viewed as a risk. And when you take a player who thrives on chaos and rhythm and force her into robotic predictability, something breaks. You can see it in her body language, the hesitation that was never there before, the pump fakes on wide-open threes, the sideways glances toward the bench before making a decision. She's second-guessing herself, not because she's lost confidence, but because someone else took it away. That's not Caitlin Clark. That's a stripped-down version, a muted version of the player fans came to see. And the worst part? It's working exactly as designed. Because Clark wasn't just told to pass more or shoot less. She was told to change who she is, to slow down, to fit in, to stop improvising and start obeying. But Clark was never meant to fit in. She was meant to lead. Great players elevate teammates, if those teammates meet them halfway. At Iowa, Clark's passes found cutters in stride, screens arrived on time, and shooters floated to the corners like clockwork. Everyone understood spacing, tempo, and the simple golden rule. When Caitlin has the ball, move with purpose. In Indiana, that harmony shatters into noise. Possessions stall as players crowd her driving lanes. Screens come late or not at all, and weak-side defenders relax because they already know the ball isn't coming back to Clark once she gives it up. The Fever offense too often resembles a traffic jam. 5 sets of blinking hazard lights, no lanes, no rhythm, no flow. Only flashes of what could be peek through. Aaliyah Boston slips into open space after Clark draws 2 defenders, finishing with ease. Sophie Cunningham sprints to a corner, ready to fire the instant a skip pass arrives. Role players who understand their lane thrive beside Clark, proving the blueprint works. But the rest of the roster? They're playing tug-of-war with a superstar. Look at Kelsey Mitchell, a gifted scorer, yes, but one who spent years as Indiana's first option on bad teams. Now, instead of feeding the hottest hand in the league, she waves Clark off in transition, or dribbles through half the shot clock hunting her own look. Each forced isolation is a brick in the wall, separating Clark from the offense she should be running. Basketball IQ isn't a polite suggestion, it's the lifeblood of Clark's game. When teammates ignore mismatches, miss time cuts, or stand flat-footed as she probes for passing lanes, they don't just waste possessions, they erode trust. And every time the rhythm breaks, you can almost see Clark's internal clock ticking. Iowa would have already scored. Eddie, if there was ever a moment for the Indiana Fever to prove they were all in on Caitlin Clark, it was the draft. A clean slate, a chance to send a message, we're building around you. They didn't. Clark's former teammate Kate Martin was right there, experienced, smart, and most importantly, someone who already knew Clark's rhythms like the back of her hand. She was more than a teammate at Iowa. She was Clark's on-court twin. The chemistry was instant. The trust was already built. Martin was the kind of player who didn't need touches, didn't need ego management, she just knew how to make the game easier for Clark. And Indiana passed, not for a future all-star, not for a bold pick with upside, but for players who barely survived training camp before being cut loose. That wasn't just a missed opportunity, that was a declaration. They didn't want to recreate Iowa. They didn't want to invest in Clark's system. They wanted her image, her ticket sales, her viral highlights, but not the foundation that made her great. And Caitlin heard it loud and clear, because when you have a generational talent, you don't just fill roster spots, you build a world around her. The Fever had a chance to say, "We trust you." Instead, they said, "Figure it out on your own." On the surface, it still looks like a team. Players huddle up, high five, share the court. But behind the scenes, something's off. You can feel it. And if you were watching closely during All-Star Weekend, you saw it plain as day. Nearly every high-profile WNBA player wore matching statement shirts during a public protest, except for Caitlin Clark's circle. No Lexi Hull, no Aaliyah Boston, no Sophie Cunningham, not one teammate beside her. That wasn't a wardrobe mix-up. That wasn't a scheduling conflict. That was a message. Clark didn't just show up shirtless, she showed up alone. A silent fracture in a locker room that should have been unified behind the most transformative rookie the league has ever seen. But instead of rallying around her, parts of this team seem to be keeping her at arm's length. On the court, it's the same story. Missed passes in transition, teammates refusing to set screens, possessions where Clark is parked in a corner, completely ignored, while someone else dribbles the clock away. These aren't just bad plays, they're symptoms of a bigger problem. There's a division growing in Indiana, old guard versus new era, players who want the spotlight versus the one who earned it. Clark doesn't argue. She doesn't beg for the ball, she doesn't stomp her feet or throw tantrums, she just watches and takes mental notes. Who runs with her and who runs the other way? Caitlin Clark may be a rookie, but don't let that fool you. She's not here to play politics, she's here to build a legacy. And if Indiana won't give her the pieces she needs, she'll find them herself. All-Star Weekend handed fans a feel-good moment. Clark and Sabrina Ionescu, side by side, laughing, locked in conversation. But to insiders, that wasn't just two friends catching up. That was strategy in motion. Sabrina isn't just another all-star. She's a high IQ, pass-first guard who understands spacing, rhythm, and how to build an offense around a system. Her career blossomed once her franchise trusted her vision, and now she's bonding with Caitlin Clark because they see the game through the same lens. Clark isn't aligning herself with random players. She's finding her people, players who move without the ball, who sacrifice ego, who understand the assignment. She's building a shadow system, one conversation, one relationship at a time. And she's not just recruiting players, she's studying them, watching how they run sets, how they space the floor, how they handle pressure, and most of all, how they elevate the people around them. This isn't just friendship, this is scouting. Because Caitlin Clark doesn't want to fit into someone else's structure. She wants to recreate Iowa on her own terms, and she's already started. Publicly, the Indiana Fever can't praise Caitlin Clark enough. She's a game changer, a once-in-a-generation talent, the face of the league. They use her to pack arenas, spike jersey sales, and plaster her face across every billboard. But behind closed doors, their actions tell a different story. When it's time to make real decisions, build a roster, hire staff, shape a system, they go silent. They choose comfort over change, safe bets over bold moves, and familiar faces over players who could actually unlock Clark's full potential. They want her star power, but not her voice. They want her to sell out every game, but not call the plays. They want her leadership, but they refuse to follow her lead. They passed on her teammate, Kate Martin. They drafted players who didn't survive camp. They let Stephanie White install a system that clips her wings and drains her confidence. And worst of all, they've surrounded her with teammates who either don't get her game or refuse to adapt to it. This isn't about bad luck, it's about bad choices. Because this team isn't being built around Caitlin, it's being built around everything except her. And the disconnect is becoming too big to ignore. Caitlin Clark doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need to storm out of meetings or post cryptic tweets. She's doing something much more powerful. She's taking control without ever saying a word. Every ignored pass, every forced benching, every moment she's stranded in the corner while chaos unfolds around her, she remembers. And now she's moving strategically. She's watching who lifts her up and who holds her back. She's studying who plays team basketball and who's still chasing personal stats. She's silently mapping out her future, and it's clear, she's not planning to stay in a system that refuses to evolve. When Clark was benched during crucial moments, she didn't complain. When teammates froze her out on fast breaks, she didn't argue. When the team passed on players who could help her thrive, she didn't rant. She took mental notes and started building something better. You can see it in her connections, in who she's gravitating toward, in her demeanor, collected, calculating, quietly separating herself from a franchise that's still clinging to its past while she's laser-focused on the future. She's not throwing tantrums, she's drawing battle lines. This isn't a player asking to be saved. This is a generational leader preparing to walk out the door unless the franchise wakes up and builds around her. Fast. The Indiana Fever didn't just draft a player, they inherited a movement, a brand, a basketball revolution. Caitlin Clark didn't come to the WNBA to blend in. She came to shift the balance, to light up arenas, and to lead. But instead of embracing her, this franchise tried to contain her. Instead of building with her, they built around her. And now, they're on the verge of losing everything. They had one job: build the future around the player who is the future. Instead, they handed her to a coach who doesn't trust her shot, surrounded her with teammates who won't share the ball, and put her in a system that suffocates the very instincts that made her great. She doesn't need to ask for a trade. She doesn't need to make a scene. She just needs to keep doing exactly what she's doing, playing the long game. Because every pass she makes, every calculated move, every subtle shift in her circle is part of a much bigger play. Caitlin Clark isn't just adjusting to the league, she's re-inking it. And if Indiana doesn't wake up soon, they'll find themselves watching from the outside as she builds something legendary somewhere else. Because Caitlin Clark isn't here to fit the system, she's here to be the system. And the clock on Indiana's chance to build around her, it's almost out of time.